Welcome to another episode of Come Together. We're live. How are you, Marat? Thank you so much for making the time to talk with me today.
Thank you for having me join. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
It's very
yeah.
exciting.
I was really excited I was really excited when I came across your profile. A couple of things jumped out to me, but one of the primary ones was the intergenerational trauma that you seem to have emphasized for yourself, and then, or that you seem to talk about a little bit yourself, and that you practice helping individuals, or maybe even is it family units as well, with dealing with generational trauma.
I mean, I think so. I think that it started with family units initially, and in my work, as I've gone on to see clients and seen the effect of that trauma in my work, I've gone back and I think not necessarily worked with my family, but it's played into how I communicate with my family. I think that's the key. It changes the communication if you can begin to understand why people communicate the way they do, why they hurt each other in the way that they hurt each other, mostly unconsciously. So I think that's where it's played back in, and I think that my work with clients has informed how I go back into my family and communicate with them.
So you learn from you learn from the work, and then you take and apply it to your own life.
Absolutely. I mean, there's this idea of heal thyself, right? If you're coming in to work with people, you will only get as far with those people as you have gotten with yourself in your own work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it's very important. If you haven't worked on yourself and you haven't done your own work, you're not going to be able to reach in with the client and necessarily help them, like be a partner with them in them getting better. So, they don't really train you about intergenerational trauma in school. It's not something that you go through some module about that. It's something that you experience, in your work with clientele. You begin to realize, okay, well, what were the conditions that you grew up in? What was the ecology of your family when you were a kid, right? I can bring examples from my own family, and I think that's where I think that's it's most pertinent, and I think it's most real for me, at least.
Would you
My
mind sharing some
mother.
of them?
Yeah, of course, of course. So my mother was born in 1946. It was right after the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother was evacuated from Ukraine during the fascist bombings of Ukraine in 1941. She at that time had a 7-year-old daughter. They were placed in cattle cars in Odessa, Ukraine, and they were stuffed in because the Nazis had crossed the border basically during a pact with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had no idea there would be a war with the Nazi Germany. So it was all of a sudden people were at the beach, and then there were bombings and airplanes were flying
No
over.
way.
So that there was no like a war, like a designation of war between the countries.
It just happened.
The Soviets actually had made a pact with the Germans, dividing Poland and they basically assumed that the Nazis would conquer part of Europe and they would capture part of Poland, and that would be the end of it. But they reneged on their pact and they attacked the Soviet Union, and they attacked right into Belarus and Ukraine. And in those very first days of war, people were not prepared. People were at the beach, relaxing with their kids, and so all of a sudden there's a war. So she got packed into a cattle car. No possessions, nothing really. They were dressed in summer clothing, along with her mother and her sister, and they get shipped off on cattle cars across Ukraine through Crimea, and then on to Uzbekistan. They were kind of refugees in Uzbekistan throughout the war, but on that cattle car, her daughter got crushed to death. And
Oh,
so she had to be, when the train would stop somewhere, and she was buried in a mass grave along with other people that had died on the train, and that was the end of it. And then you just pack up and you keep going a few minutes later. So if you imagine the the emotional damage that's caused by that, having a 7-year-old child that dies, you bury them on the side of a train track, and then you continue going, that doesn't just go away. There's no therapist on the train. And so my mother was born right after the war, and one has to imagine that when she was born, my grandmother, who was she's probably still grieving the death of her daughter, and also my assumption is that she had a very hard time connecting with this new child because she was probably still in grief, and she was also afraid, what if I lose this daughter? Like, how do I connect with this child? And so my mother really grew up in a relationship with a mother that was very strained, on the one hand cold, on the other hand very enmeshed, and those were the conditions of her early childhood. So now she ends up having a child. Well, when she has a child, her conceptualization of what a mother is, how a mother loves, how a mother holds, it's not the same as one would have today in our world. And that then gets carried on into the next generation, right? So now I'm born. Now, many years later, right? But now I'm born. So now I have a certain relationship and understanding of connecting with a child. And so the question is, do I continue that forward, or do I break that cycle? And usually what I see in practice is that when people come in, they're kind of being called forward in their line, in their lineage, to stop some cycle of recurring trauma. And that's sort of where my work begins with them.
Wow. I got so much to say and ask about or follow up with. One thing that I from my own experience that I think, and I would love to just hear what your thoughts are within this context or this perspective, is my dad's father was very tough on my father in a typical, my grandfather, I guess, is in his early 90s now. So, my dad was growing up in the 80s, with a typical, 40s dad, I guess. And then, and he went out of his way the rest of his life to specifically not be like that, and so he became very you could call it anti-authoritarian or anti-hands-on, and, and he basically just wanted whatever made us happy, and he didn't really have too much of a preference, and if he did, he'd generally keep it to himself, and try to do everything the opposite of what his dad did. And he definitely succeeded in that, and then, and then, 25 years later, or 30 years later, I'm standing around and I'm saying, I wish that I was, held a little bit more accountable in my life, because I would have loved for something, I would have loved to have a heads up that, that the amount of discipline or work that it takes. And then I'm going to just, and so you kind of have this same type of, it's another cycle, but it's a cycle of a swinging pendulum, if that makes sense, from one end
Oh,
to the
absolutely.
next. And is that something that, would you, if I was sitting down and explaining this to you, how would you go about trying to resolve that, unless you just say that's what life is and that's what nature is and that's what families are and the best you could do is be conscious? Or is there an underlying, symptom, I guess, cause, and the way that they manifest is just symptoms? So it doesn't make a difference whether you're being hands-on or hands-off. There's a problem that's underneath it that's causing you to be too much of one or the other. And that's what it is.
I think the answer is yes and yes. So the key word here is balance, right? So your grandfather, again, we can use this word, I like this word, ecology, like the ecology that created a condition in which your grandfather micromanaged, he became authoritarian, like there may have been a lack of safety somewhere in your grandfather's life. And so what does he do, right? He exerts just overwhelming efforts to control everything in the environment, right? Because
Right.
he does not want to be in a situation where he is unsafe again, nor does he want his children to be unsafe again. So he creates all of these structures, and those structures are suffocating. So then your father comes along. He notices all of that. And then he said, well, that devastated me. I'm going to be the opposite of that. The pendulum swings in the opposite direction. The answer is somewhere in the middle, right? Like, we need, as children, we do need structure. We don't need suffocation. We don't need enmeshment. We don't need a situation where we have no breathing room and then we cannot develop into the authentic version of ourselves. We end up having to become whatever version our parents squeeze out of us.
Right.
And so the answer is somewhere in the middle. And now you have the benefit of seeing both sides, the opposite ends of the swing, and you say to yourself, my son, my daughter, needs structure, but she doesn't need suffocation. She can be safe and held without being smothered. Right? So this is how you break that cycle. What you end up sharing with her, what you end up giving her, is a sense that she can be herself, and yet there is a foundation that she can stand on. She's not standing on sand.
Right.
And I think that's the key to developing a healthy psyche, and then one in which, as she moves forward with her own children, she will be reminded of the fact that this is how I was raised, and I'm healthy, and I'm functional, and I'm myself. I'm true to myself. I want my kids to have that, meaning I should raise them in the flavor of how I was raised, and that perpetuates a more positive cycle, I believe.
Yeah. Which is what I guess we're ultimately hoping for. I think that there's a lot more. I'm certain that there's a lot more conscious. I think people are, and maybe it's just what I've seen in my circle, but I've definitely seen that a tendency in the last couple of years for people to start looking more inwardly than I've ever experienced before. And I don't know if that's due to a certain point in my life that I'm arriving to. I guess more mature adult years as you start taking on more responsibilities, late 20s, early 30s. But it's really it makes me feel really hopeful because on one hand they're the kind of people where you talk to them and it sounds like they haven't really put much thought into who they were since you saw them last in high school or college, and it's been a decade or two. And then there's the people that you talk to and you can see they're really being they're really self-conscious, and they're on this kind of journey towards themselves. And I think there used to be a certain stigma to that, the same way there used to be stigma to therapy and stigma to mental health, that I hope is just kind of starting to drift away.
Yeah, I mean, the awareness today and how we are moving towards being more in tune with ourselves, I think it's far more profound than it was 20, 30 years ago, without a doubt. There is an intentionality to be right with yourself and also to look at your behavior. That being said, I think it's still a fairly small number of people in reference to the general public.
Sure.
Because I get a fair number of clients who, people that bring in their kids, and I'll meet with the kids, and almost certainly when I see children in the office, I want to see the parents. When I see the parents, I begin to understand the kids. Like, everything makes sense once I see the parents. It's inevitable.
I feel the same way with my high school students. It's crazy. I love the parent-teacher night because I meet the parents and I'm like, oh my God, everything makes sense now. Like, this clicks too good.
And it's interesting because those parents, there's no awareness, or there's very little awareness. Like, they don't see the interplay of their behaviors and how they cast a shadow onto their kids. And then the kids have these behaviors or these symptoms: depression, anxiety, tics, panic, whatever it may be. But they don't see how the ecology of the kid's life is perpetuating it. I'm not saying the parents are the cause of it, but many times the parents, because they haven't done their own work. What's that?
I picture it almost like they set the stage, and you can do what you want within the stage, but you have a lot of surroundings that are accessible to you that that you're not necessarily choosing, but are just kind of you find
They
yourself
either
in.
set the stage or they light the stage on fire. They're going to pour
Right.
gasoline on it. Like
Yeah.
they do little to soothe the issues that come up because they themselves are not soothed. They themselves have not worked through something. And this goes back to
Yeah.
that same generational trauma situation, right? We're back to that conversation. So whenever I have a kid come in, by default, I'm almost always going to send that family into family therapy because something is happening there. And I see
Yeah.
this over and over and over again.
That's really, really interesting. So you're saying when a kid comes in, it's generally because there needs to be bigger picture work that needs to be done, not just, this kid has ADD and he has a hard time in third grade math class or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's it's kind of systems work, right? There's something happening in the system, and if the system starts to change, things will change in the environment. Things will change,
Yeah.
and that may ease things. Does that mean that every kid that has ADHD has some kind of a problematic family environment? Not necessarily, but we may not need to rush to medication. We may not
Yeah.
need to rush to certain things if certain things in the environment can be changed. Behaviorally adapting and seeing what's happening in the family. A lot of times that is so helpful. And it changes dynamics because many times there are comorbidities, right? It's not just ADHD. It's ADHD and then there's anxiety, or there's ADHD and then there's some kind of like impulse issues or anger issues or depression or whatever the mood issues might be. Something else is at play. And so if we can tone that down, if we can resolve that, then we can look at the ADHD and see what's really needed here. So I rarely rush to medication. People come in the first thing, I think my kid needs Adderall or my kid needs Ritalin or whatever, and I'm like, wow, we want to jump in the gun on that. Let's just figure out what's happening here, and let's
Yeah.
first see if we can help this child to navigate their life a little bit without rushing to give them medication.
So what would be, a kid comes in and a parent comes in, brings a kid in, and they're in eighth grade, they're having a hard time, they say they have AD, they want Ritalin or they want, whatever. And what are some things that you would do or tell the parents or practices to that would cause what happens that causes the change that causes the kid to, I guess, manage it a little better, and what's happening that allows it to happen without medication? Is that question, is that
So
clear?
well, yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is what's happening in the environment that needs to change that will maybe help the kid without resorting to
Yeah,
medicines
yeah,
or
because I mean, we're kind of
yeah.
I feel like we're used to just like saying, oh, this kid has, some kind of problem, issue. It's a learning disability. It's a challenge. It's whatever it is, and there's just nothing you can nothing that can be done about it. But I guess we're saying that that's not correct, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really firmly believe that when a child comes in, I want to talk to that child. I want to understand like what's their emotional state. What are they going through? And it's hard sometimes because for kids to share, especially if they're going through something, you have to build rapport. There has to be a sense of trust between you and the kid that they know that they can talk to you. And a
Yeah.
lot of times, don't talk to their parents or something's happening at school. There might be bullying involved. There are so many complicated factors. The dynamics of being a young person today, it's very different than the dynamics of being a young person when I was a kid, right?
You think
There's a
so?
lot more. Absolutely. I mean, we can dive into sort of my feelings about social media and about what I've seen it do to kids in these last maybe 10 years.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of things at play. And so I'm going to have several meetings with the kid, the parents, to understand what is happening here. A lot of times with children, schools these days are much more geared towards identifying kids that are struggling, and they will have them tested. So a lot of times I will get reports already from the school, either school psychologists or outside psychologists that have met with the teachers, met with the parents, met with the student, have gone to the school, have done testing. There's a lot of work that's been put in before the kid will come to me. And now we're looking to see how can we best support this child because they've been identified as having ADHD. So then I'm going to look at what other factors are at play. Are there, mood issues? And so many times there are. Are there any kind of anxiety issues? Because when a kid is anxious, when a kid is panicked, guess what? They're not paying attention. They're in their own head. There's negative self-talk. They're dissociated sometimes. And so
Right.
it appears like this kid is not paying attention. But this kid is actually paying attention to everything that's happening inside of them. And so that needs to be addressed. And so that's kind of, it's a complicated process. It's not just a one size fits all. I need to see what is happening. And I really believe that this environmental approach, so that's how I've been trained, and it seems that it makes sense that we live in systems, and if those systems are broken, we are going to be broken as well. And there's another part to this, and that is resilience. So different kids, different kinds of resilience, right? Kids that grow up, they're able to sort of they feel supported. They feel like they have the wherewithal to get through whatever it takes. They have a positive attitude about life. They're going to navigate something very differently than a kid that feels that they're less than, a kid that feels that they're not supported, a kid that feels that there's nowhere to turn to for support. And that's a
I've
very
noticed.
different outcome.
I've noticed as a high school teacher, because I was very, very insecure until I was about, maybe 17, 18 years old. I had very little security in myself. And I was able, and it helps me, I guess, identify, I could see similar, kids with similar kind of expressions or, body behavior or language that, or tendencies that I had. And it is incredible how easy and how easy it is to build a kid up and actually give them a little bit more of a sense of self. I think that I think a lot of times what I've seen in the last just couple of years teaching, and I'm only doing it for this is my fourth year doing it, but one thing I've seen countless times is that by telling a kid, I know you've got more in you. You're great, and I would love to see it. And I want to work with you to bring it out. They start to believe it very, very quickly. All they need to do is hear it a lot of the times. So a lot of times I've noticed that it almost feels like there's a lack of positive reinforcement, and kids that do get that probably could get a stronger sense of resilience or will or determination. I imagine, right?
100%. And moreover, also being heard. Because a lot of times what happens is parents' initial response, or even sometimes educators' initial response, is to tell the kid what they should do to get better. Like, if you did this, you're going to do better. And almost immediately, it doesn't matter what the kid is going through. They begin to sort of fawn to these statements that are made. So they put on a happy face. They try and achieve certain things, but they're not really being heard. They're not really being their self-concept is not being developed. It's just an imprint of whatever they're being told laying on top of them. And so, absolutely. It's so easy once you start.
I just showed that my high school, my one class yesterday, the song "Father and Son" by Cat Stevens, and we were talking, and the line, and I pulled up the lyrics while we were while we were listening, and and the line, "From the moment I could talk, I was ordered to listen," and everyone was able, felt immediately like, whoa, and how can I try to explain when I do, he turns away again, and it's always the same old story. And I was like, how many of you guys have just felt like no matter what you try to tell an adult or your parent or, a teacher, that whatever you say, they're not hearing what you're saying, and they just want you to hear what they're saying. And I mean, I think that is the that's the pain and challenges of being a kid. I really I really believe it. And I think that's actually what causes a lot of amazing creativity and self-expression that usually comes as like a quote unquote defiance of that. You know, that's why the youth culture has always been so creative and prominent, because it comes from a place of being, you know, a lot of times of being shut down or ignored until they just have to be heard and explode into something, you know, ball of creativity or, and sometimes disaster. You know, I mean, there's a reason why the 27 Club exists and why so many great artists die at such a young age.
100%. Yeah, agreed. And I love that you brought Cat Stevens into the class and had the kids listen and identify with that. It's like the concepts and the issues are timeless, right? They just go
Yeah.
on and on and on.
Yeah, they're just human. They're just
As,
human.
as we were, as we were talking, I was gonna sort of infuse another sort of part of this genealogical, or not genealogical, but sort of this heritage, right? This Jewish
Yes.
heritage concept, in that talking about resilience with kids, right, and how that develops. And I can give you kind of these two small vignettes. Like one of these vignettes is from my wife's family. Her similar story. She's from the same town as I am, the same city as I'm from.
Wow.
And during the war, her grandfather, her grandmother had this romance. They were in love with each other, and they had two children. And then the war starts. And in the very first days of the war, the grandfather gets hanged in the middle of the city. So he's killed. And so the mother is in shock, and they get evacuated also to Uzbekistan. With the mother and these two children get evacuated. But the mother is a very different kind of woman, who comes from a very strong Jewish family with long roots in that area. They've lived there for sort of hundreds of years, and a very proud family. So she gets with these kids to Uzbekistan, and it's almost like she sustains a joy for life. Like that there can be darkness, but you must sustain a sense of light inside of you, even in the darkness.
Yeah.
And she raises these kids with this understanding that no matter what, you will persevere. No matter how bad life is, you can find joy in life. You know, they end up like basically starving in Uzbekistan. Like they have no money. They have nobody that they know there. They get through it. The mother works in this factory. These are two little kids. They get back to Odessa after the war, and as so many Jewish families that came back from evacuation, the apartments that they had lived in maybe for decades or for more than decades, for hundreds of years, those apartments are now inhabited by Ukrainians and Russians who basically just moved into the apartments that were empty, and they're told, get the hell out. This isn't your apartment anymore. And here you have this mother with two little kids, and she's walking around the city trying to find somewhere to go, and ends up in a basement. There's this murky basement with these two kids, and they live in this basement for like almost a decade. In a basement, a subterranean basement where it gets cold in Ukraine. It freezes there.
Yeah.
And it's not a good life. But the mother comes home from the factory. She sings with the kids. She sustains that light for them. And eventually she actually ends up dying quite young. But the kids grow up with an understanding that life moves on and you must stay positive. And then my wife's mother, one of the children that was in the story, ends up basically giving my wife that same sense of joy and optimism in life.
It's beautiful.
And no matter what, she sustains that optimism, right? They immigrate to the United States. They make a life for themselves here. And my wife was born in Ukraine, but she sustains that sense that no matter what, we will make it. And that was a very different kind of woman and kind of resilience than the resilience that my mother gained from her mother, who was broken by the death of her daughter, who was broken by the war.
Yeah.
And so it's so powerful what we give our kids. They can navigate through so much darkness if we can infuse that light into their lives. And if we can't, and they end up sort of like later in life realizing that they don't want to live their life in darkness, then we as adults, can move towards that as well. We can find a new way. We can find a new kind of motto or a new kind of a mantra to live our life with, and that's sort of where I come in. That's where I try and guide, or at least be a partner in that process. So that's kind of just another story, right? We talk about the trauma of our people, and that's just within the last 100 years. It's like 70, 80 years. It's pretty amazing. There have been so many traumas for us, right? There's if we really go back, there have been so many traumas. The stories are endless. There's so many to choose from. It's like we need to figure out what our topic is, and then I'm sure there's a story to match that. In terms of
let's keep on going, because I'm loving. I think that I'm loving this and all the anecdotes. And I actually think, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, especially with introducing this notion in mind. That aside from generational trauma, there's got to be cultural trauma. There's got to be just the fact that a group of people, and call it any people. It doesn't it doesn't have to be the Jews. It could be the Irish. It could be it could be the Africans. It could be the Taiwanese. It doesn't make a difference. But a group of people that have that as a society have suffered, and therefore the decisions they make as a society and as a community bears the weight of their psychology, the group psychology. So like almost the psychology of countries or large entities, I would call it. Because it's very, very clear when you just look at the world that is what's causing a lot of the conflict today. It's just generational trauma between nations that are just better equipped to duke things out than two individuals might be, or two parents might be, or whatever it is.
It's much easier to duke things out than it is to actually sit down, talk, heal, find a way forward. Right? That's a much
because you're doing it because you can't do it for millions of people that are part of your society necessarily.
Right. Yeah. I think that the cultural trauma, that frame to look through is very interesting for me. This is another small kind of anecdote. I remember that my wife's uncle, who lives in Germany, right? He's Jewish, immigrated from the Soviet Union to Germany, and he sat with me having dinner one night, and he said to me, that it's very important for us as people to not stick our heads out. It's a Russian phrase, "Не высовывайся." It means don't stand out, right? Now, I've thought about that for a very, very long time, that statement of don't stand out, where that comes from. And it comes from this cultural trauma. It's this trauma of being a Jew, right? We don't live in our country. We did not live in our country. We lived in the Soviet Union, right? It's different when you live in Israel. Mm-hmm. But to live in another country, to be the minority, and the minority that very frequently was not adored, right? Very frequently was a vilified minority, right? Because what are our values? Our values are education, family, right? Like that kind of strength. So we send our kids to school. We value that. We tend to do well because we excel at these things that are hard, but they are valuable to us as a culture. And so, but to live in a country like that, you don't want to stand out, because the one that stands out gets his face beaten. The one that stands out ends up losing his job. The one that stands out might end up getting killed. And so it's an interesting statement for me, because it's coming from one generation, a much older generation, to a younger generation that has not grown up until a certain point with anti-Semitism. I really did not know what anti-Semitism was. But he did. He saw it very clearly, right? And so the trauma that he had to have gone through, to live his life being meek, right? Be meek, be small, be hidden. That's the underlying, that's the communication from him. Don't stick your head out. Be silent. very different from how I was raised, right? What do you mean? Be proud, be Jewish,
Yeah.
put your head out. Right? Look at all of the successes of our people. Look what we have accomplished. Look at this small country in the desert that has grown and flourished into a first world nation. Right? Be proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we in some way, again, my generation was raised very different, and wow, what a slap in the face October 7th was.
Right. Well, and yeah,
Like
yeah, and in the
like
subsequent time since then.
Oh, but I'm saying 100%. Like that's. I'm just saying that framework, what happened on October 7th, and what followed, what a rude awakening for so many people. I think, so
Yeah.
many Jews. I meant to say,
Yeah.
even in my groups, I have seen how that sense of betrayal and that sense of, wow, maybe we really shouldn't stick our neck out. Maybe we our head out. Maybe they were right. Maybe things aren't as good as we thought they were. And taking stock of that and then realizing absolutely not. We are not going to live our lives that way. We are not. No one's going backwards. The only way is forward and through. So it's another interesting sort of going back to this concept of cultural trauma. I think that the whole October 7th situation was so traumatic, and it was traumatic because for so many people, what we thought was not accurate. Like we were living in a bit of a delusion. It feels like, and now it's like now that we've seen it, now that a light has shined upon that, we actually need to make the world right with what our image was. Like we now realize that there is a job. We're called to kind of we have an important mission to make the world right with how our vision was, and it must be that vision, right? It must be that the world is improving, that anti-Semitism diminishes, not increases. So we have to now live our lives that way. And before we were kind of sedated. We were this halcyonic idea of the world being, somewhat being friendly, and now it seems less so.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and one thing that I don't know why I even think this way, but a lot of times I tend to, when it comes to a conflict, I tend to look inward a lot and see, what I would have done to potentially cause, a problem, and then because I'm usually tough myself, and then I would give, I mean, there are times where you even giving someone the benefit of the doubt, like, behavior doesn't, justify itself. But one of the first things that I do is kind of look in and be like, am I acting in a way? Am I just being defensive right now? Am I just acting like this because I'm just being a jerk about it? And and it's because me on the other end of it, or would I care? But I think that I I don't know. I don't know what to do with all this. I don't know what to. I haven't known what to do with the last 2.5 years of you know, my Jewish and, my Jewish identity, my love for Israel, my love for America, my love for people, and it just feels like no matter what I do or what I think or what or who or what I listen to or anything that anyone that I talk to, everything kind of just ends up going in circles. So it's really I don't really, and I think that all this, and part of the reason I think this happens is because everything is so entangled in so many different perspectives and philosophies and histories and different understandings of things that I almost feel like everyone can make a case from every single side that they're standing on about everything that they do, but then what? Like, okay, so now everyone has a case, and now what do we do? Like, we're still at a stalemate, right? So how do we move forward? What do we do to move forward? And that's kind of what I've been stuck on, and I don't really know I don't think anyone really knows what to do about it, or if they do, I haven't found that. I haven't found them yet.
Well, I mean, I think that this is sort of the generational impasse, right? We've been standing at a crossroads here. Somebody gains an inch, another person gains an inch, and it goes back and forth and back and forth, and it's been that way now for decades, right? The reality is that you said it correctly. Everyone can make a case from every side, right? That's true. There's no doubt about that. It just depends on what side you're standing on. That narrative seems more appropriate or more right depending on the side that you're standing on. And ultimately, I feel like the people, and this isn't maybe like even a full answer, but there are people that are trying to look at everything and say, look, this is all true. All the pain, all the suffering, all of it, it's all true. And yet, we need to find a way forward.
Yeah.
We're not going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Jews aren't going anywhere. Palestinians aren't going anywhere. We're here. Something has to give. We have to find a way forward, because killing each other endlessly till the end of time, it's not a solution, right? And
we don't have an appetite.
I don't know that there is.
Like the world doesn't have the world doesn't have an appetite for it. I mean,
and every war ends. I mean,
yeah, everything does. This is zoomed in.
The Protestants fought the Catholics for 100 years. Eventually, all wars end. The question is, do we want to keep killing until for another 100 years, and then find a solution anyway, or do we sit down and try and find a solution? It is so complicated, but it reminds me of that. What's the old saying from the Fiddler on the Roof? He goes, if we all live our lives eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, we're going to all end up being
we're all going to end up blind and toothless.
So we're going to all end up blind and toothless, right? So at some point, right? And there are groups. I mean, I'm aware of this, right? There are groups that are sitting down together and they're figuring out how to navigate this. They're figuring out, how do we live with each other and not against each other? Mm-hmm. And I don't have the answer. And certainly I am just as susceptible to the emotional swings of these last few years, right? I've experienced the grief, the pain, the anger, sorrow. It's all moved through me. I participated in the Nova, the
Nova museum. But they did at Burning Man. They did a Nova memorial tent, and my wife and I we were volunteers at that tent, and it was so incredibly moving. It was so incredibly moving to, can you tell me about
be
that?
There with all these people.
About that whole experience, including
what's that?
Can you tell me about that whole experience, including Burning Man, just like from the top? Because that actually sounds like an awesome story, and I would love to fill in context for anyone that doesn't know, is not familiar with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, this was by far one of the deepest and most meaningful experiences of our life. There was a Nova Festival in Israel, right? It was the original attack when the Palestinians crossed the border, and there was this kind of psytrance rave happening in the desert. It was a rave for peace and for unity, actually. And they attacked this festival. They killed, raped, maimed. It was a mass insanity. There was a moving museum exhibit around the world that moved with, which was beautifully done as well. They sort of explained all of it, and they had all this material, all of these artifacts from the site. Anyway, the original organizers of Nova decided to bring a copy of the tent from the festival to Burning Man and to set it up as a memorial to the young people that were killed, because Burning Man is this amazing art and music event. I don't want to call it a festival. It's not a festival. It is a gathering of people that kind of live the best of humanity, try and exhibit the best of humanity, the values of humanity, with no commodification, no money exchanged. And there's beautiful artwork, there's music, there's just it's an amazing event. There's nothing on the planet I think quite like it. And so the organizers gathered money. They brought this gigantic tent to the desert. They set up the tent. They created these spiral staircases. And they lined the staircases with wooden steps. And on each of the steps, there was an angel, a cutout wooden angel with the name of one of the kids that was killed at the festival. And it was all lit up. And then throughout the week-long festival, they had these art cars, which are these large lit-up cars. Many of them have music systems on them. They would have them come, and they would create an environment for people to dance with these angels under the tent. And the organizers asked for volunteers to stand guard as guardians of the tent, and not so much guardians if something bad would happen, but to be there to talk to people, to help share, to help hug, to help support in whatever way was necessary. And these guardians stood basically every day for 7 days, 24 hours a day in shifts. So there were I think there was like 4 to 6 guardians at this tent throughout every night. So basically, protectors of the tent. And it was incredibly moving to do one of those shifts with my wife and some of our friends, because people came to talk, to cry, to listen to music, to bring some kind of a small artifact or something. And we had so many people come. We had this gigantic group come in. They were like Catholics or something that had been at a festival in the desert around the same time as Nova, and they heard that it happened, and they were so moved and so it was so heavy for them that they all came together and they wanted to dance under the Nova tent with all of these spirits of the lost young people that were at the festival. It was incredibly moving. And the end of the Nova experience there was the last day, the Saturday of Burning Man. It was the day that the man is burned. There was a gigantic sunrise gathering. There were thousands of people. They brought these 3 art cars to the sunrise, and they had this woman, her name is Scarlett Delator. She is a beautiful singer, guitarist. She sang Jewish prayers and Jewish songs on one of these art cars to all these people, and they had basically a memorial, like a service. And then at the exact time that the music stopped at Nova, so at the hour at which they turned the music off because the attack had started, the original DJs that had been at Nova were there at Burning Man, the ones that survived. And they started the music back up. And the whole crowd started dancing. It was just, it was insanity. People were crying. The energy of it, the intensity of it. I mean, it was the best of us, That's the best way I can say it. It was really the best of our people.
You think that?
Yeah.
I think that there's something something incredible to, and I think that it's something that we kind of lost recently, definitely during COVID, but I think is so integral, and that's embodied group experiences. And those embodied group experiences, whether it's Burning Man or whether it's going to a movie with 50 other people or 100 other people and laughing or crying together, or going to a baseball game or a concert or anything like that, going to these embodied group experiences seem to amplify whatever you're experiencing, and and I've been thinking a lot about, in general, about what a lot of today's problems are, and a lot of it is isolation and loneliness. And I wish that, I wish that there are ways to encourage more of that type of activity, because I know for my own sake, and I've actually had this experience recently. I moved to my neighborhood in Hollywood, Florida, a couple of years back, and I became friends with a group of other young dads who have anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 kids, and we hang out maybe once or twice a week minimum, even if it's for 20, 30 minutes at a time, and it just we just get together. If it's a tough week, we end up either laughing or complaining or sharing or whatever it is. We hang out, we have a beer, and and we go home before anything, before anything gets crazier, before in case we miss any of our responsibilities. But there's every single person in the group, their personal lives, their family lives, their lives have just gone like immeasurably better just by talking to them, that they just feel like everything is better, and I really really wish that people would realize, or I guess that that there would be more emphasis in society on more group activities like that, because I think that we have these little experiences, and then like even if you have a thought and then if you say the thought out loud, it changes the way that you emotionally process it. And then when you say it out loud to a person or five people or 100 people, or you share that experience together, then it just the growth is exponential, and it almost feels like that's been cut off from our society.
I can't agree with you more. I think you're totally right. I think that isolation is the death of us. We are at heart social animals. Right? We don't live. We're not. We're not. We might think that we're individualistic, and we are, but at the same time, we exist in social groups, and I think that something has been lost. And I think it's not just COVID. At one point in this country, there were social organizations, right? The Lions, all the social groups, right? There were church groups, there were cultural groups, there were the Shriners. People belonged to organizations, and it was a place for you to go to have a beer, a glass of wine, to talk, to have a dinner on a weekend, right? To some degree, the church and the synagogues that have the Shabbats and the Sunday masses where people bring food, those are all conditions in which we gather as a community. And community is one of the fundamental pillars of mental health. And the model that I was trained in includes that, meaning like, how is your relationship with yourself? How is your relationship with your community? And how is your relationship with your purpose, your passion, and your creativity? Like, if those three things, if you can answer great to those three things, it's very unlikely that you're going to be a depressed person. It's very unlikely that you're going to be suffering from panic attacks and anxiety.
So you said self, focusing on self. Repeat the three. It's self,
what is your
community, and society, and passion.
This is a check-in. Right. This is a check-in that we do as a treatment team in our practice. And the question is, what is your relationship, or how is your relationship with yourself? How is your relationship with your community? That could be your family, your parents, your wife, your greater community. And how is your relationship with your purpose or your creativity? Mm-hmm. Those are the three questions.
Yeah.
If you can honestly answer those questions and feel that you are right with those things, that they are good, that you are connected well to yourself, that you believe in yourself, you speak well to yourself, right? If you have that connection with the people around you, they reflect your value back at you, right? You're not living in a vacuum. People see you, appreciate you, and you have a relationship with a sense that there is meaning in your life in what you do. Either be it creativity, be it meaning through the what you bring into the world, it is very unlikely that you are going to have a mental health problem. Does that mean it will never happen? Of course not. But it's very unlikely.
Fascinating. And so it's crazy because it sounds simple.
Is it? I mean, how many people that you know, if you ask them, how is your relationship with your purpose? Like, do you feel like you're living your purpose and living your creativity? Are going to tell you, yeah, absolutely, I love my job, or I love this, I'm doing great. It's exactly what I want to do. I don't know.
I believe that's because that comes down to education, I think, doesn't it? I mean, that comes down to conditioning and education. I think a lot of people are taught to stifle that kind of thing, or that there are bigger priorities or values than those things, and we feel like it feels like we just experienced a giant countrywide experiment, and the answer is that that for mental health, that that the pursuit of money or status or power or position over all else, including passion, community, and relationships, does not work. And and I think that,
Correct.
but I don't think that it's necessarily hard to do. I think we have to adjust the way adjust our values, and I think that's actually probably a lot more easily done than we realize. Think about how much fewer people drink alcohol today than 5 or 10 years ago, or have limited their alcohol consumption. And I know that a huge part of that
Or smoke
movement.
cigarettes for that matter.
Or smoke cigarettes, right? Or trying to be healthier in terms of the type of processed foods they're eating, right? Like these cultural shifts, even it might not take over completely yet, or even ever, but I mean, once it's in the zeitgeist and once people are aware of it, then and especially I think what's going to be fascinating is as AI takes away jobs, or as jobs kind of become less and less hands on, people are going to be forced to confront these three things: your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your community, or your relationships otherwise, I guess, external ones, and then finally your passions. That's the thing that we're actually kind of, I feel like, hurling towards. And the scary thing is that a lot of people don't even know what to do with that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, a lot of my work, when people come in to my office and they meet with me, the treatment plan that I write frequently, it is essentially a view into these three directions. Like that's what I do. I'm looking at how do I realign with you, right? How do I partner with you to realign your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your community, and to stand with you as you find your purpose, meaning, and passion or creativity in life. That is the treatment plan. It's not, my treatment plan is very rarely take 2 Prozacs and call me in the morning. That's
Right.
That may be a very small aspect of that relationship with self, because if you're in darkness, in a state of such despair that you cannot see beyond that, then we are going to give you something to try and help you deal so that you can then look at these three things in a more rational way. But that's
Right.
usually the only reason that I would give medication.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that these three pillars are fundamental, and I truly believe, I believe it so much that I practice it with my wife on a weekly basis. We have this tradition. We do Sundays in the jacuzzi with our coffee. So we literally get into the jacuzzi. We have a small little jacuzzi outside of our backyard. We sit down with a cup of coffee, and we ask each other these three questions: like, how is your relationship with yourself? How is your relationship with your community? How is your relationship with your purpose
I have to
and
start
your
implementing this.
creativity? And we talk. We have a small little download. It's not an hour-long thing. It's like, this has been a tough week. I've been struggling. It's, I didn't meditate this morning, yada, 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 but I feel really great with my community. Everybody's well, everybody's happy, healthy, and I feel like they're there for me. So it doesn't need to be long, but to be able to discuss that and to check in with each other,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
you check in with your friends in that beer, right? That's that check-in. It doesn't need to be so structured, but this just happens to work for us, and I think it's great because it's a access point into how we're doing. I mean, a lot of times we're kind of pivoting out of our we're moving through our discussion very very fluidly. A lot of times when couples come in and I meet with them, what I get is the sense that, like, their relationship, there's no time for them. Like, yeah, of course, they discuss, like, the groceries and the car payment and this, and they go to work and they go see their parents, or they watch the kids. But where is
They stop
your
dating.
relationship with each other? Huh?
Right. They stop dating, and
I didn't hear what you
they
said. What'd
start
you
being
say?
roommates. Can you hear
Right,
me?
but
Yeah.
the problem is that all of a sudden you realize that you've poured yourselves 2 beautiful pairs of concrete shoes. It's like it's stifling. Like you never stop dating. You never stop dating. That's the secret of a great relationship. You never stop dating. You never stop having sex. You never stop.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
minute you do, it's like it's like,
You
well,
lose it
what
or
are we
lose
doing
it.
here?
You use it or lose it, like
Yeah,
everyone says.
100%, 100%.
How can I ask? How do you get people? How do you help people find their passions? Because I I want to know for my own sake, but I also know that a lot of people, especially people that have kind of been off put to this general notion or ideal, for their entire lives, and passions are stupid, and you have to have a career, or if you're going to have a career, it doesn't have, it's more important that you make money than be something that you're passionate about and make a little bit less money, whatever it is. But how would you, or even do something on the side? How do you help someone identify a passion when they don't know what their passions are?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's actually the coolest part. It's the best part of the profession. First of all, most people that didn't grow up with hobbies or any kind of pursuits, they've lost the connection to
Right.
that, the ability to understand what it means to experience joy for the sake of joy, right? Not joy for the sake of I'm going to make money on the back end of this, right? Like,
Right.
the question becomes, how do you feel when you are doing this? Like, how are you feeling when you do this? Well, you have to do things to know how you're going to feel. So the most important thing, the number one factor to being able to help someone and sort of stand with them as they find their passion, their creativity, whatever, is a willing candidate, right? So you need someone that says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go and I'm going to do these things. I'm going to go take this class. I'm going to go to this event. I'm going to go dancing. Because if you don't have a partner, you cannot drag them, heels ground into the ground, and kicking and screaming to some event or some course. You need a willing candidate. And so my first job is to try and convince them of the importance of this, to find something of meaning. So I had this client who came in, and his whole thing was he cannot find a good Jewish woman. He was just struggling. He'd gone to the matchmaker, he did this, he did that, tried all these different things, and nothing was working. And I said, how about you just go and do something you enjoy doing? And in the process of enjoyment, you might find someone that also enjoys doing that.
Yes. That's how
So,
I make
so
friends,
what does
by
he
the way.
what does he do? He goes, I've always, yeah, exactly. So I said, so he's like, I've always wanted to take a pottery class. If you saw this guy, you would be like, this is not a person that is going to take a pottery class. The guy is huge, just like muscular. He works out. I've always wanted to take a pottery class. I'm like, fantastic. He goes to pottery class in Brentwood. He's the only guy amongst 12 women in the pottery class. He comes back and he says, I'm never going again. He goes, I'm the only guy in the thing. I feel so stupid. I said, tell me how you felt when you put your hands in the clay. I go, I don't care about the people there. I don't care about the building. I want to just know, can you please go back to the moment you put your hands in the clay and you started to, the wheels started turning or whatever you were doing and you started working. What did you feel? He goes, I laughed a little bit. Oh, I go, that's interesting. I want to hear about this laugh. Tell me more about that. What did that laugh feel like? Do you ever just laugh for the sake of laughing? Because it comes from inside of you. Not because somebody told you a joke, or not because you made an extra buck, but just you laugh because something ignited inside of you. That's where we find our passion. That is the inner clue that you are, you've reached out and you grabbed something that has some meaning for you. Well, guess what? He goes back to the class. And guess what? There happens to be a Jewish girl in that class who is single. And they start seeing each other. So, you see, he didn't go there to find, necessarily to find the woman. He went there because he wanted to try this thing that he thought he might like. And in doing something that he liked, he suddenly had something to talk about with someone that liked it too. And there goes the neighborhood, and that's how it happens. And it's a very kind of simple, right? You said that whole process seems very simple. It's just these three things, and it is. It's not complicated. It's not some massive career in astrophysics. It's not the next purchase of a corporation. It's in these simple things, right? That we find joy. And if that gives you joy, and if you giggle like that, then maybe there's something there. Now, does that mean that he's going to pursue pottery? No. But in talking to that girl, they might find a mutual interest in hiking. And all of a sudden, hiking has meaning. And all of a sudden, they're smiling together on that hike. And they're holding hands. And life is different all of a sudden. So, a small story, but one in which you understand, how do you help someone find their passion? I had another young woman, came in, very low self-esteem. But this very acerbic sense of humor, like the way that she laughed at herself, the way that she poked at herself. I said, you should try stand-up. You should try, take an improv class. And by the way, we recommend in our practice improv classes all the time for low self-esteem. It's a great way to build up self-esteem, to learn how to do improv. So she goes and she joins this improv class and ends up joining their comedy troupe. How do you find your passion? You go. First step. It's the hardest step is the first one. But once you take that first step, the path begins to open itself. So it's it's very cliched, but the path is not clear before you take the first step. The path becomes clear when you are on the path.
Do you remember the book The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
So there was one particular scene in that book. It's so funny because I didn't know anything about the book. I didn't know, I just stumbled upon it one time. I didn't know that anyone felt very strongly about it one way or the other. And I was talking about it, and I was in college, and my friends are like, dude, that book sucks. I'm like, what? How could that book suck? I just didn't understand that it was even controversial. But there was one, there was the particular instance where the guy that, I guess the main sad character, not really a hero, not really a villain, the guy that pursues architecture just for the prestige and for the sake of it, but really wanted to be an artist. There's a point where he calls Howard Rourke, who's the main hero, into at a certain point in his 40s or 50s, he achieved everything he wanted to achieve with his career, and he goes to and he buys his shed for his backyard, and he disappears into his shed for hours of time at a night, and he doesn't let his wife in, he doesn't let his friends in, no one's allowed to see what's inside, and he invites this other guy Rourke in, and it turns out to be paintings, and this guy, felt like he had shut off his, his desire for his passions for so long that he wanted to see if it was too late to kind of re-engage with it. And, and the way that she describes the book was so heartbreaking. It made me cry while I was reading it, and it was an extremely profound moment. But that, he's looking at these pictures that look like an adult, some inner child had tried to draw on, but through an adult, but crudely, and he just it was just too late for him to pursue this. I think a lot of people, feel like it's too late in their lives at any point to really try to do anything or try to do anything great, and if they're not going to be able to do it great, then what's the point? I I specifically try to avoid that. I picked up guitar 3 or 4 years ago, and I've been at it since. And I'm always trying to do new things because I always don't feel like it. I always don't want to feel like it's too late. But what? How do we? How do we get people out of that that space? Because I feel like it's a really real fear, and it really is it's a tough feeling when you started something later at life and someone with and you're comparing yourself to other people and you're insecure about it to begin with, and then all of a sudden, you're not good at it, and what's the point in even doing it? Almost, do a lot of people express that sentiment? Okay, we're back.
So, this point about not pursuing something because it's not going to be perfect goes to this whole concept of perfectionism, right? Do you stop a child from playing a game because they didn't play it perfectly, right? Do you stop a child from doing some kind of art because it's not perfect? Of course not. It's not about being perfect. We're not looking to pick up the clarinet to be an award-winning clarinet artist, right? That's a musician. That's not the point. It's like the client that put his hands in the clay and giggled. It's about just feeling something. It's about feeling like, I like this. It does something. And sometimes it's about being attuned to yourself. I know that people, they get older, they kind of lose touch with what am I feeling right now. But the reality is that you don't need to pursue a creative endeavor. You don't need to pursue something to be the best at it. We're trained as kids, and I think that we do a lot of disservice to kids when we try and push them towards being this ideal version of something. Don't get me wrong. We all need our Mozarts. We all need our Beethovens, right? Those kinds of outliers are going to always exist. But as individuals, we do not need to create the best piece of pottery, the best drawing, the best anything. My house is full of artwork. Many of those things were made by dear friends. They are beautiful pieces of art for me. Does that mean that they are award-winning? They should be up in the the Museum of Art? Maybe not, but they have a lot of meaning for me. They are very rich for me. I would be more upset about losing those than losing some piece of art somewhere in a museum that doesn't have any meaning for me. So what we do for ourselves, that is by itself very important. That in and of itself is enough. We are enough. And so often I think clients feel like they're not enough. We are enough. Not for what we do or what we give, for who we are. We are enough. And when I try and help somebody as I'm kind of ushering them towards trying a class or something, give up on the perfectionism. No one needs your perfectionism. You don't need your perfectionism. Just be completely present in the moment and ask yourself, how do I feel right now in the moment? Am I depressed? Am I anxious? Am I telling myself that I'm garbage? That I'm not worthy? Okay, let's talk about that. What's real here? So I think the answer to that question that you first asked about how do you find your passion, how do you find your meaning, it's about being attuned to yourself and understanding what do you feel. I think many people are generally numb or overwhelmed. That's a lot of the feeling out there right now. I mean, I'm sure that you must have that around you as well, right? There's just a lot of numb and overwhelmed. And if there is a moment when you feel something that is not one of those two things, God bless, you found your passion. You found something that is reached in past the weeds and grabbed your heart and pulled you out. And that by itself is enough.
Yeah. I think that's beautifully put. I think it's right, because I think that if it's a passion, then perfectionism doesn't even necessarily. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I'm sure the people that are perfectionists are passionate about what they're perfectionists about. But
Sure.
a passion can still be a passion.
And by the way, there's nothing wrong when you're passionate about something. You are constantly in a state where you are trying to sort of, I'm going to use the word perfect, different from perfectionism, right? To always better yourself in that frame, right? So if I make a piece of pottery, the first piece might look like, it was made by a person that doesn't know what they're doing. And then as I work on it and I add hours and hours, it begins to have the appearance of something familiar. Is that perfectionism? No. That is honing your art. That is honing your skill. That is a normal part of the process. It's a different story than you creating an initial piece and then slamming it and saying that's garbage. It doesn't deserve to even see the light of day. But that comes from perfectionism, like that it should be something that it's not. I should be something that I'm not. Therefore, I'm not worthy of even respecting or loving myself.
I'm so happy that you just said that, because I just had this experience with guitar where for a little while I was I was being tough myself. I wasn't practicing. I wasn't really playing very much because I would listen to great, music, or I would hang out with friends that were great musicians, and I'd be like, oh, what's the point? And then at a certain point, I realized that what was so frustrating for me wasn't that I wasn't as good as them, but that I didn't know how to express myself on it. But then at that point, I that almost snapped me right back into playing and practicing again, because the pursuit didn't become about perfection. It became about my ability to express myself and to become myself. My search for what my sound is and what my tone is. I know when I write, if you come across a poem that I wrote, or you come across, um, a particular, I don't know, conversation style, you would know that it's me. Like, it's very, very, it's very distinct, and I think that that's what people find, that's like passion personified, is an external, or some kind of external creative act that is expressive of who you are, and so I think that you're that it's and then the more that you refine that, then it gets closer to being the most quote unquote perfect, or the best that it can be, and that's you become great.
100%. Absolutely. And so often, unfortunately, that is stifled in us. As
Hmm.
kids, it's stifled. I grew up. My parents were immigrants. They came to this country. They had no money. They worked, two jobs. My mom had two jobs. She was going to school to become a nurse. They did not have money to send me to music school. They did not have money for these extra things. And so I did not grow up playing music. And it wasn't until I was really, I think, like 15 or 16 years old, that mom's like, oh, I can get you piano lessons. And I remember going to play piano with this Russian teacher who had taught in Moscow. And, he had me repeat these notes over and over again, over and over again. And then after a certain number of lessons, he said to me, you'll play like a monkey, but you don't have an ear. You'll never play, be able to just pick up music. That was the end of it. The minute he said that, it killed it for me. I was like, well, what's the point of coming back
Yeah.
and continuing, right? And it just killed it in me. And so often, and the crazy thing is that I am as guilty of carrying that forward as he was for making that statement. My son
Mm.
started playing guitar when he was, I can't remember whether he was 5 or 7, fairly young, maybe a little bit older than that. He started taking guitar lessons. And he was so small that he couldn't get his hand completely around the guitar. But he played guitar, he practiced guitar, he would play for me. And I knew in my mind, I had the awareness of, only say positive things, only reinforce the will to continue. But there was something in my eyes. I knew that it was. I could feel it. Like there was something in my eyes where it was like that teacher had left a stain inside of me.
Hmm. Yeah.
And a child can see, they can see into your eyes, and you can't gaslight them because they can
Yeah.
see. And I know that it had an effect because over time, he stopped playing for me. He did not stop playing, but he stopped playing in front of me. He stopped practicing in front of me. I went to all of his, the shows that he did. I went to all his recitals. I was so proud of him, so happy. And it took so long for me to eventually come to him and say, I am so sorry. Because I know that it's in me. Like I have this thing that I needed to change. And after that, it changed everything. Like he played, and I looked at him differently after that. So it's like so easy to plant that seed inside of us and to kill a passion inside of us. It's so simple to do that. And as you said earlier, it's so easy to grow something, to plant a seed of growth and to reinforce something positive, as you do, I'm sure, with your students, because you have this awareness of it. So, we should not give up on ourselves because we have someone else's perspective of what perfect is in our minds. Perfect doesn't matter. Our inner joy matters. That's what matters.
Yeah. And that's how, I mean, so that's actually what I find, what I've found to be so contagious, I think, about the Grateful Dead, because I've only gone into them the last couple of years. But when I get into any kind of like band or music group or topic, I love to do deep dives, and I love to read everything and listen to podcasts and listen to all their live, as many live shows as you can, 'cause, my ears could process or my brain could process. And I'm listening to interviews with Jerry Garcia, and like the only thing that he ever wanted to do was just do the things that he loved doing, and that was it. And he did it, and he did it as often as he could, as frequently as he could, and became great at it. And people were drawn, people were not only drawn to it, they could not remove themselves from them. Like, I mean, no one really has cult followings like the Grateful Dead, like what they 25 years after, or 30 years after he died, it's still, I mean, it's grown even more than ever before. And he's dead. And this I think that there's this unconscious appreciation, and maybe, I hope it's conscious, but if people don't realize that, I guess it's subconscious appreciation for someone that just is great for the sake of loving what they do. And those people make the best leaders, and those people make the best, parents, and the best roles at their job is the pursuit of the job for the sake of it, not to be the best of it.
Joy is infectious. And when you are experiencing an inner state of joy, you magnetize the world around you. I mean, if you think about that, right? Like the sense of that sense of joy. I'm thinking here of like even the Hasidim when they're like dancing and they're like in that ecstatic state, right? There's just
It
something that puts a
melts
smile
the
on your face.
room.
It's just like
It
what?
melts the room. It like melts the
It
ice
melts
in
the
the room.
room.
It's crazy.
It absolutely, and that is that inner state of joy, right? So, without a doubt, pursuing your passions, connecting with your community, connecting with people that reflect your value back at you, and having a fundamental understanding that you are enough, that you are good, that your relationship with yourself is what matters. Ultimately, it's what matters, because when that relationship fails, the world becomes a very dark place.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it does. Well, that's why you have to keep on doing what we do, I guess.
100%.
That's why you have to keep on doing what we do. I hope we can do another recording, because there's like 3 or 4 big topics that I didn't even get a chance to get to that I wanted to talk with you about. But including film and psychedelics, and then actually a little bit more about your backstory. But um, Marat, I really appreciate the time. This is awesome. This is so much fun, and this is so enlightening. And I really appreciate how you didn't only introduce topics, but you really gave colorful and really important and valuable stories with, to go along and create an actual context and a picture to the context, or to the concept. So thank you so much, really, for the time. This is really, really so amazing. And I hope to be able to do part 2 soon.
Well, I had a great sense of joy doing it with you, so I'm going to definitely make myself available. I wish you the best, and absolutely, let's reconnect. So many more great topics to discuss with you.
I'm very excited. And next time you come down to South Florida, if it's any time in the near future, again, please, by all means, I'd love to introduce myself in person. All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Be well. Take care.
All the best. Take care. Have a great rest of the week. Bye bye.